Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the biggest moment, possibly the biggest moment in the history of YouTube podcasting, the very first episode of the Pooch and Reed Podcast. I am Joe Puccio. Alongside me is Braden Reed. We're pumped to be here. I mean, Braden, I don't know about you, but there's something different in the air today. You kind of got chills running down your back. That's just for me, but what do you think?
Oh, I'm very pumped to be here, Joe. It's a long time coming. I'm surprised it did take this long, to be honest with you. Like, I figured we'd do something like this sooner rather than later, but we're here now. NFL season is over after that debacle last night. So we'll get into some draft stuff and see where it takes us.
Absolutely. And before we get into that draft stuff, I guess we'll give a little bit of an introduction about ourselves. My name is Joe Puccio. We are both freshmen at the Newhouse School at Syracuse University, so that's how we know each other. I originally am from Western New York, so if you follow us on Twitter at Pooch and Reed Pod, you understand why it's going to be flooded with Bills and Sabres stuff, especially Bills stuff for the next month or so. So just a warning before that happens. And I'll also be posting on our Instagram as well at Pooch and Reed Pod. So follow us on both Twitter and Instagram. But yeah, it's a little bit of background about me. Braden, you can go ahead.
Yeah, so similar situation. I'm also a freshman in Newhouse alongside Joe. I'm originally from the Philadelphia area, but went to high school up in Rhode Island. So I've been around Philadelphia sports most of my life. That's my fandom. I've heard a lot of New England past 5 or 6 years, much to my disappointment. Can't stand New England fans, but I'm sure we hear plenty of that from Buffalo and Philadelphia fans. But yeah, happy to be here. Happy to talk sports anytime, especially with a person like yourself, Joe.
Oh, well, thank you. And just for the people at home, this dude didn't want to be my roommate. So just think about that.
All right.
just put that in mind before we get going. All right, but anyways.
We'll address that story.
So because this is the very first episode, we're not going to go crazy here. It's going to be a really simple episode. Braden and I are just going to give our first edition of the 2021 NFL mock draft. And how this is going to work is we're going to be alternating selections. Now, this isn't for the entire first round. This is just for the non-playoff teams because that's where we know they will be picking. So the order that you see on your screen right now, that is the correct draft order. It'll start getting a little confusing once we get into the playoff teams down here. So that's why we're not even going to talk about it. So we're just going to be alternating selections. Braden will have the easy choice of making the Jacksonville Jaguars selection. And then we will just go from there. We'll be stopping at pick number 18 with the Miami Dolphins, who got absolutely squashed yesterday by the Buffalo Bills. So, Braden, go right ahead.
Yeah, so this one is, probably the easiest pick of, I'd say, the past 8 years for sure, since 2012 when Andrew Luck came out of Stanford. Probably you could say longer than that. But, I mean, you can write this one in Sharpie at this point in time. I think everyone knows Trevor Lawrence is the pick here. Generational talent, I don't think does it justice. He's incredibly talented and has shown that at Clemson. There isn't really a flaw in his game. Accuracy outside of the numbers, I'd say, is the only knock on him that I've seen so far. But again, he's 22. I don't know, 23 years old. I'm not sure about the exact age, but ridiculously talented kid. Obvious pick here.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I mean, there are only a few generational quarterbacks that you have the ability to take. And, I was thinking about this going into the season, which teams wouldn't take a guy like Trevor Lawrence? And I could only name like Kansas City, Buffalo, and like Seattle as teams that if they had the opportunity to take Trevor Lawrence, they would do it. So Jacksonville, here's your quarterback for hopefully for the next 15 to 20 years. And right now, as we're speaking, Doug Marrone got fired. So Urban Meyer steps in. Who else steps in? It's a very inviting place. You wouldn't think Jacksonville would be great for a head coaching situation, but you have a plethora of draft picks and the ability to have Trevor Lawrence. I feel like it's a pretty inviting spot. So now let's go to number 2, the team that we all thought Trevor Lawrence was going to go to, the New York Jets. And I'm not a fan of the New York Jets. I do not like the New York Jets for obvious reasons. They're in our division, and not really happy that the Jets get the number 2 overall pick, but I'm happy they're not getting Trevor Lawrence. Throughout my entire draft process, Zach Wilson was my number 2. And, he's a stud. They call him Mormon Mahomes. He's that good, right? And I think you could put him under center, and he's very similar to a lot of the dual threat quarterbacks in this National Football League. But Justin Fields, man, he popped off against Clemson in the college football playoff, and he'll have another opportunity to do that against Alabama. And the thing is, people are like, oh, he just did it in the playoff. He still needs to be more consistent. Bro, if you can go up against Clemson and throw the way you did, that has to be that is justice for being a higher in my rankings. So for that reason, obviously there's a lot of flaws with Justin Fields' game. We don't really know if he's just a straight up passer, if he's a straight up runner. But that's something that the New York Jets can address with their new head coach and in a new system. If you can build a team around Justin Fields, I think that the New York Jets are going to take that opportunity. And it's pretty much a toss up between Fields and Wilson. But I think Justin Fields is the man moving forward.
Yeah, no, I really like Fields. I came into the year liking him, and I've liked him throughout this season. We came into this season wondering if he could jump into that number one spot. Obviously, Lawrence extremely talented, but so is Fields. And there were questions: could Fields overtake Lawrence for that QB1 spot? Obviously, it's been a tough season for him. It's been a tough season for college football in general and the Big Ten, Fields' division. He hasn't played the same number of games as Clemson or some of these Alabama's teams in the SEC, and he's struggled in some points when he's been on the field. He hasn't looked like the QB1/QB2 that we knew and loved from two seasons past. But he showed the ability to do that against Alabama. He showed what he's capable of, and I like that pick too. I do.
The Jets are a franchise that is going to need to have a chip on their shoulder. Obviously, they drafted Sam Darnold a few years ago. They thought he was going to be the man moving forward. And I would personally, if I were a New York Jets GM, I would want someone with a chip on their shoulder. Every single ranking, Justin Fields has been below Trevor Lawrence. College recruiting, NFL draft, Heisman voting. Justin Fields is like Kevin Durant to LeBron James, right? That is the chip on your shoulder kind of prospect that the New York Jets could be like, hey, you fit exactly who we need. Zach Wilson, you're great, but you've just been tearing it up in the Mountain West for a couple years. Like Justin Fields, this is your opportunity to finally be the number one quarterback over Trevor Lawrence. So I really like that pick. So yeah, Justin Fields, I think he's a really solid pick for the New York Jets. I think that the Jets could really start to turn things around with a new head coach, new offensive coordinator, similar to Jacksonville. Just kind of blow everything up and start from the ground up. So, Braden, you have the Miami Dolphins pick at 3.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Tua Tagovailoa, great prospect coming out of Alabama. The whole tank for Tua thing last year when the Dolphins were doing that, they ended up getting him. He hasn't looked great. He's shown flashes, but he's not been that QB1 that they've been looking for. Really struggled against the Bills yesterday. Has had some games where Fitzmagic has come in to replace him. So I think there's question marks there. He hasn't shown that he's the franchise guy yet. But if I'm the Dolphins, I'm not looking to replace him just yet. I give him another year or two to show what he's capable of. But this is an interesting spot for the Dolphins. There's a lot of different places you could go. There's holes on this team. They played really well this year. But you look at receiver, Devontae Parker's good, but you need a clear-cut number 2 behind him. Defensive side of the ball, linebacker, you look at guys like Micah Parsons, edge rushers like Gregory Rousseau. There's a lot of places the Dolphins can go with this pick. With that said, though, you need to protect Tua Tagovailoa. I think they drafted Austin Jackson last year. He's been okay. That was like a mid-20s selection. That's not really a franchise left tackle spot. And I think with the Dolphins, you have a chance to get that guy and a guy like Penei Sewell here. Penei Sewell's been touted as a generational talent at left tackle. I don't know if I'd go that far to call him that. He's very good. I think offensive lineman number 1 in this class. But if you get a guy like that, protect Tua Tagovailoa next year and for years to come, I think that'll give him the chance to display his ability even more.
I agree. And it's tough for me to agree with drafting at the same position twice, but it's offensive tackle. And you can never have too many offensive linemen. And Tua, like watching him against the Bills yesterday, he was just scared to go up against practice squad guys. I mean, it was just like it was not the typical Tua Tagovailoa that we've seen at Alabama. So if you throw in a Penei Sewell with Austin Jackson, you're really giving Tua the confidence to throw the ball downfield because maybe he's just not confident enough to open up that playbook just yet. So I do agree with that pick. And number 4 is the Atlanta Falcons. And I think it's time to replace Matty Ice. Look, he's a great quarterback, led the team to a Super Bowl, could have been a Super Bowl victory. But the thing is, you need to have a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, and a new quarterbacks coach. or new quarterback themselves. Because the Atlanta Falcons are not the same team that they were when they went to the Super Bowl. Their defense is depleted. They don't really have an identity on offense, and they have a quarterback on the plus side of 35. This is where Zach Wilson's going to go. I think that Zach Wilson is very similar to Matt Ryan, but he's a little more mobile, and I think he throws a more accurate. He doesn't throw a more accurate football, but he throws a tighter football than Matt Ryan does, and he's not very skittish behind the pocket when he comes up with pressure. I think that even if you want Matt Ryan to be the quarterback next year, I'd even endorse Matt Ryan to be the quarterback next year, and let Zach Wilson develop under Matt Ryan, learn from a 15-year veteran who went to an ACC school and then ended up coming to the Falcons and pretty much being their quarterback after Michael Vick, who was seen as the generational guy. Zach Wilson is the guy who can come in, be like what Patrick Mahomes was under Alex Smith, just keep learning, keep growing, and you never know how impactful that growth could be. I mean, Micah Parsons is great. Even some of these wide receivers are solid. I think the Falcons are pretty much set on receiver, though. You have a guy like Zach Wilson on the board. I think you have to go and take him.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think learning under Matt Ryan will work wonders for his ability. Obviously, super talented, but a bit raw. And I think you come into that system, learn under Matt Ryan for a year, and you start your second year with maybe Julio Jones. We'll see on that. But Calvin Ridley is a fantastic wide receiver. Hayden Hurst, tight end. He's going to have weapons in Atlanta. He's not going to be going to a bad situation, and I think he'll succeed there.
Exactly. And in that NFC South, there are some tough defenses you have to go up against. So it's not like Zach Wilson's going to have cupcakes to the playoffs or anything. You're going to see his experience. You're going to see how strong he gets. And it might even fuel you to go up against Tom Brady twice a year. So you never know. But the Atlanta Falcons have the opportunity to draft the replacement for Matt Ryan. I think they'll do so here.
All right. So for pick number 5 with the Bengals, leading up to this pick, they kind of moved around. They were towards the top of the draft for most of the season, but they rattled off some wins that I didn't really see them winning. They beat the Steelers, and now they're at 5. So if they were higher, I think Penei Sewell is the obvious choice. They need offensive line help. Joe Burrow is getting buried, and that's part of the reason why he ended up getting hurt, tearing his ACL. But I think there's a legitimate chance Penei Sewell either goes at 2 or 3 to New York or Miami, and he's not going to be there at 5. I'd be shocked if he was. But the next best thing, I think, for Joe Burrow is receiver. Now, there's 3 guys you could go with here, and I wouldn't be mad at you. I think they're 1A, 1B, 1C, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Smith. Any of these guys help Joe Burrow in the Cincinnati offense. But I think what better way to reunite Joe Burrow with his former LSU teammate, Jamar Chase. Incredible storyline. Jamar Chase is ridiculously talented. He's not as fast as Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith are, but polished route runner, can go up and high point the football. Clear-cut number 1 for this Bengals offense from day one.
And we were talking about how great Devonta Smith is. I think right now he's the favorite for Heisman, which is crazy.
Oh, I'd be shocked if he doesn't win it.
Yeah. And Jamar Chase opted out of the year. So everyone's kind of forgetting how good Jamar Chase is. And it's like, yo, this guy was Joe Burrow's number 1 target when he was throwing 60 touchdowns.
He won the Blitnikoff last year for best wide receiver in the nation. So good.
Yeah, like he's a stud. And I think that if you fit him in with Cincinnati, this is a Cincinnati team that already has Tyler Boyd. You're getting the final years of AJ Green. You know, the AFC North is tough, and it's going to be a long road ahead for the Cincinnati Bengals. But reuniting some college teammates, always a great option. Now I'm going to hand you this one. I don't want credit for this pick. You're going to make this pick for your Philadelphia Eagles. There are a lot of holes with this team, and I want to know, as an Eagles fan, where you think they should go.
I think this is a tough one because in doing a mock draft, I like to do it as how I think the teams would take the pick. I think what I would do with this pick is a lot different than the Eagles front office is going to do with the pick. I'd be at this spot. I think it's either Micah Parsons, Jalen Waddle, or Devontae Smith. If I'm the GM, I'm not. Howie Roseman, not a huge fan, but it sounds like he's going to be the GM come draft time. So here's the 2 things. Wide receiver, they took Jalen Reagor last year. Great pick? No. Justin Jefferson went right after him. Just broke the rookie receiving record. Don't get me started.
And the Vikings got that. The Vikings got that pick because they traded Stephon Diggs to the Bills. So thanks for that too. Yeah,
they were laughing after the Eagles took Reagor, and for good reason. I thought terrible pick by Philly. It's only been 1 year for Reagor. The jury's still out. We'll see. But He left the game with a concussion on the same day Jefferson breaks the record. Not great. Anyway, so I don't think they'll go receiver back-to-back years. I think Howie Rosen has too much pride to admit his mistake and go receiver in back-to-back seasons. Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith seem like an obvious choice for me. Help whoever's at quarterback. We'll see if it's Wentz or Hurts. I don't know. But I don't think they go receiver. Micah Parsons is another obvious choice to anchor that defense, anchor that front seven. He's very versatile. He does it all. We'll get into him when his pick comes around. But I don't think the Eagles organization values the linebacker position enough to take Micah Parsons. Defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz is leaving. They'll be bringing in a new one. But I just think organizationally they don't value the position enough. But cornerback is another position. And I think this is the spot they end up going. Darius Slay looked okay this year, not outstanding. Definitely not the Pro Bowl level that we've seen him in the past. And he's getting up there in age. I don't know his exact age, but he's getting towards 30. He's got maybe 2 or 3 years left of good football. So I think grabbing a number one corner that you can develop into being that lockdown guy who can follow guys like Terry McLaurin, follow guys like Amari Cooper or Michael Gallup, you're going to need that in this division. And I think the obvious pick here, this is the pick that I'm endorsing for the Philadelphia Eagles, is Patrick Surtain II out of Alabama.
Ooh, yeah, I think Surtain is a great pick. I honestly thought you were going to go Caleb Farley because I was looking at Caleb Farley right here, but I forgot about Surtain just for a little bit. He was a stud. Like, he's a great player, and I think that, if the Eagles do go with Surtain at 6, I don't think. Well, I mean, I guess you could answer this question. I don't know if you'd be very pissed off about that selection now.
Not at all.
Yeah,
Not at
so
all. I think that's a great spot for the Eagles to go.
Yeah, so obviously you'd like to see wide receiver, but at the same time, if you can get Darius Slay and Patrick Surtain on the team, you are eliminating those big time receiver threats, especially like teams that the Dallas Cowboys have. So I think that Philly, that'd be a pretty good selection, and I'll take your word for it. Being a
I think you watch these Alabama games, you don't hear about Surtain a lot, and you're like, is he really this good of a player? That's exactly what you want from a cornerback. If you're not hearing about him, he's doing his job. He won Defensive Player of the Game against who'd they play? I'm blanking on it.
Ohio State? No. They played. Wow, who'd they play?
Notre Dame
versus 4. Notre Dame. Yeah.
He won Defensive Player of the Game. You didn't hear about him. They don't throw at this guy. They absolutely do not want to test him in coverage for good reason. He's shown the ability, and yeah, I can't endorse this pick enough. I'd be thrilled with it. Even though they should go wide receiver, I'd be happy with the pick.
Sweet. So now at number 7, this is a team that I root for. I think all America roots for. Is just feel bad. It's the Detroit Lions. And I've already picked a quarterback twice on here. So you can guess who the offensive mastermind is. But I am also going to go quarterback here because Matt Stafford doesn't deserve to be in Detroit. Matt Stafford is a fantastic quarterback that has had his career wasted by the Detroit Lions. Took him to a playoff, I think, once or twice, but they haven't been in the playoffs since 2016. Matt Stafford, as much as I would hate it, he looked great in a New England Patriots uniform. He would be a stud in San Francisco. I think that Matty Stafford shouldn't be in Detroit anymore. So there's a lot of quarterbacks still on the board. Obviously Trey Lance right here. You've got Mac Jones from Alabama. You have Kyle Trask from Florida. I think all those guys do end up finding their way into the first round. You're going to see some teams that are very trigger happy with the quarterback position. Just look out for Washington. But right here, I think that Detroit they're going to go with Trey Lance. And no one really talks about Trey Lance. Where the heck did Trey Lance just go? Oh, wait. Hey, there we go. So Trey Lance, solid player, but no one really talks about him because he went to North Dakota State. Similar path to what Carson Wentz took. And what you see in Trey Lance is you see a very mobile quarterback that has the ability to take some big shots. And who does that remind you of? It reminds you of guys like Josh Allen, right? Who can just run you over. It reminds you of guys like Lamar Jackson, who can get out of situations pretty easily, make it look very easy. And he can even take some big shots if he really needs to. Trey Lance, if the Lions need a new head coach, if he ends up bringing in a new offensive coordinator to fit in a guy like Trey Lance, then that's even better. You have some solid targets. You have TJ Hawkinson out wide. He's one of the best tight ends in the league. Obviously, Kenny Galladay, and you have to re-sign Marvin Jones Jr. this offseason. But if you can bring back all those pieces and you can address the offensive line in free agency, I think that adding in Trey Lance is just something new for Detroit. You never know when you need to just have a refresh in life. And I think that Trey Lance could just be that new guy in Detroit. If he develops under Matt Stafford, that's great, but you could easily, if you're the Lions, you could easily trade Matt Stafford and get some draft capital for it. I've already drafted a quarterback 2 times earlier, but man, he's too good of a player. I think that Trey Lance is a stud. He's better than Trask and Jones on my board. And I think that the Lions, with this pick at number 7, you might not have the ability to draft an elite quarterback at number 7 again. So don't waste your chances here and draft a guy like Caleb Farley or Micah Parsons. Just get your quarterback out of the way and move on.
Yeah, I think the term that I would use to describe Lance is he's a really, really good prospect. I don't think he's as polished as a guy like Wilson or Fields, obviously Lawrence. But I think outside of Trevor Lawrence, he probably has the highest ceiling in this draft class. He's ridiculously athletic. He's got a cannon for an arm. I think last year in North Dakota State might have had 1 or 0 turnovers to go with an insane amount of touchdowns. He's a big play machine. He can make plays all over the field. Only knock on him that I have is deep accuracy. Needs to get a bit better, but you're in the NFL. You're going to have the best QB coaches. I'm sure that'll get fixed, but extremely high ceiling for Trey Lance. I think he could be the face of that Lions franchise.
Absolutely. And you look at a NFC North that the Bears and the Vikings, they are just back and forth, right? The Bears made the playoffs somehow. So, I mean, hey, congrats to the Bears. You have the Green Bay Packers, who probably have 3 more years left with Aaron Rodgers at best, because that's when his contract comes up. But there is going to be a time where this division is completely up for grabs. I don't think Minnesota's quite ready for it. I don't think Detroit's quite ready for it. I don't think Chicago's quite ready for it. But in 3 to 4 years, if you have a young quarterback that's already developed in your system with some solid weapons outside, Detroit can make that leap. And in the next 2 or 3 years, you develop that defense. You never know. The Lions could finally make their way into a Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history. So, Braden, I'll toss it over to you for the 8th pick.
I was actually going to give you this one since you gave me the Eagles one. I went back to Bengals and Philly, so I'll let you take Detroit and Carolina here.
Wow, you are so nice. I have no idea where Carolina is going to go. I think that there are lots of different options for the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, they are a running football team with Christian McCaffrey, but he's been hurt all year, so you could obviously, not right now, but you could look at getting a second running back, maybe a third running back behind Mike Davis. You lost Luke Kuechly to retirement, so you could be looking at a linebacker replacement. You could even look at a guy like Kyle Pitts, who could be a weapon for Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Two Gloves might need a guy that you can just give him the football. But I think that the Carolina Panthers would be shocked to see Micah Parsons on the board and not take him. You have Luke Kuechly, who's been gone for years, your defensive captain, arguably outside of Cam Newton, led them to a Super Bowl. Micah Parsons, I think he has that ability. Now, Braden, you're the Penn State enthusiast of us too, so you probably have a better background of Micah Parsons. But the Carolina Panthers, in a division with Brady, in a division that will now have Zach Wilson, Drew Brees is on his way out. Carolina could establish that defense. They drafted Derek Brown last year, so going defense 2 years in a row, not the worst thing, but you have an elite stud linebacker that falls in your lap at 8. I don't think you can let teams like Denver and Dallas, who were better teams than you this year, end up getting the better player. So I think that the Carolina Panthers, obviously there are a lot of good options with wide receiver and with edge rusher and with linebacker. I think they're going to have to find that replacement for Luke Kuechly right now, and a guy like Micah Parsons, who I see can go as early as number 3 to Miami. I think that Carolina will have to take Parsons.
Yeah, Parsons is definitely the best defensive player on the board at this point. You could certainly make the case he's the best defensive player in this class as of right now, and he'd be great for that Panthers defense. They lost James Bradbury to the Giants, who's been outstanding there, but they really need that anchor on defense. Micah Parsons is extremely versatile. He's not just a middle linebacker off-the-ball guy like Luke Kuechly was. He can do a lot more than that. He can rush the passer. He's sideline to sideline, which is a term you hear a lot nowadays for linebackers in the NFL. He's quick. He can do it all. I think he'd be a great choice for Carolina.
Number 9 is the Denver Broncos. And,
so this is an interesting spot for Denver. I think they could certainly consider quarterback here, but with 4 quarterbacks off the board at this point, I don't really think this is a Mac Jones spot or a Kyle Trask spot. Who knows? They could reach. Kyle Trask is definitely the prototypical quarterback for the Broncos, as we've seen over the past few years. So he could be a possibility there, but I don't think it is. Drew Lock hasn't looked great, but he could use another year. They've had some injuries on that offense, and a full year together could do him some good. I think on the defensive side of the ball is probably where they need to go here. And there's two main guys that I think I'd consider. That's Gregory Rousseau and Caleb Farley. Denver needs help at corner. They were great at corner 5 or 6 years ago when they were making those Super Bowls, but not anymore. Those guys have gotten up into age. I think AJ Bouye is there. He's not what he used to be. So I think Caleb Farley is the pick here for Denver. You can make a case for he's the number one corner in this class. I wouldn't agree with you, but he's very talented. I believe he opted out this year. But he's a really, really good prospect. He definitely has the potential to become a number one outside guy for that Broncos team. And you're going to need it. In a team with the Kansas City Chiefs, you need a good cornerback to cover guys like Tyreek Hill, all those Chiefs receivers. You're going to need a guy like that. And I think Caleb Farley fits the bill.
Great answer. And I mean, you mentioned it, quarterback. I think that Drew Lock has a lot of potential as well. I think that injuries also set him back. Obviously, COVID set them back as well. So, I think that another year with Drew Lock in a division where it's pretty much just Kansas City, you could see a lot of development with Drew Lock, and having a stud like Caleb Farley back there, it makes it a little bit dangerous. And maybe Patty Mahomes doesn't get too trigger happy with a guy like Caleb Farley back there.
Absolutely.
So now I've been granted the gift of Dallas at number 10.
Lucky you.
I know, right? If we're drafting based off what the organization thinks, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, go for it. Just load up on wide receivers. But I'm not going to go that route as much as I want to, because I just want to stick it in our buddy Will's face. Man, there's just a lot. There's a lot happening here. I don't know. The thing with Dallas,
it's a tough spot. It's a weird spot. Definitely.
The thing with Dallas is like you assume that they have everything filled out, right? They have stud wide receivers, Dak Prescott, Zeke Elliott. This team should be a playoff team, and they're not. The defensive side of the ball, I think, is their biggest issue right now. Obviously, they drafted CeeDee Lamb last year. I think that was a good pick, especially with guys like Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper just making a gazillion dollars this year. You might want to just have a cheap wide receiver out wide. So I think this year, if I were Jerry Jones, I'd obviously be much richer, not living in here, but I would have the ability to just go out and get a defensive stud. And the first guy that I'm really looking at here is Aziz Olujari from Georgia. A lot of people have Kwity Paye above him, but what I saw from Olujari this year was just an impactful speed rusher that also has a really massive frame. I think that Aziz Olujari is the best speed rusher in this draft. Obviously, a lot of people think Kwity Paye is better than him, but I have Olujari higher on my board, and I think that he would be a menace on that pass rush, and especially in a division in the NFC East where there's not really one team that has a really solid offensive line yet, and there's not a team that really has a solid number one quarterback outside of Dallas. So if you can get a pass rusher that's a stud at number 10, obviously I think they would love to have Micah Parsons fall in their lap, just like Carolina had. But yeah, I think I'm going to go Aziz Olujari here. But again, if you want to make the argument for Kwity Paye, go for it. That's just me being petty.
Yeah, no, I can't argue with that. I think Ojulari is a good player. Paye and Rousseau obviously still being there. You could go any of the three ways, and I wouldn't blame you. Offensive line, Dallas could go. They had a lot of injuries there this year, and it showed, especially with Dak Prescott out. But defense was so glaring for them this year. And I think with Dak Prescott hopefully back, we'll see. But they need to improve that defense, and Ojulari will help that. We'll go a long way with that.
Absolutely. Now the New York Giants at 11, 3 NFC East teams already. Not a great division this year. But the New York Giants, they are a team that needed the Eagles to beat Washington in order to be where Washington's picking. I believe right now they have them picking at 19, but obviously they have a playoff run to finish up. Holes for the Giants. There's some strong spots for the Giants. Braden, where do they go?
Yeah, so obviously Giants fans aren't going to be too happy with my Eagles. I don't blame you. That was abysmal last night. But here we are, the Giants picking at 11. And I think this could be another team that could consider quarterback. But again, with 4 off the board, it doesn't make sense at this point. Daniel Jones has not been very good. Guy turns the football over a ton. But I think this is a position for a wide receiver. Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith have kind of fallen down the board here. 11, these guys could go higher, and I think they fall right to the Giants' lap. And giving Daniel Jones a playmaker outside would go a long way for that offense. Sterling Shepard's good, but operates really well out of the slot. I think if you give him a Jalen Waddle, this offense would drastically improve. I think you can make the case for Devontae Smith here. He might win the Heisman. He's a great receiver. Jalen Waddle broke his ankle earlier in this year, but in my opinion, Waddle is a clear-cut number one receiver on pretty much any team. He's got ridiculous speed, but I don't think he's just that. I think I've seen a lot of comparisons to Henry Ruggs, who is incredibly fast and just a deep threat. But Waddle can go up, high point the football. He's a good route runner, can get better, but he's a lot more than just speed on the outside. And I think giving that offense, again, a clear-cut number one guy would really help them out.
Yeah, and when you're looking at Alabama, I mean, we'll talk about this more when we get towards the draft, and you'll see Mac Jones starting to get in the conversation here with first round picks. It's tough to really evaluate Alabama players because they are the best team in college football. They get the best players every year. So Mac Jones just needs to be able to flick his wrist, and he'll be able to make those completions and touchdowns. But that's where the answer of why Mac Jones is so high on this board is because of guys like Jalen Waddle. He's a stud. He is very good. Braden, you said it, so I'm not gonna reiterate it. But the New York Giants, I think a guy like Daniel Jones would be so happy to get a guy like Jalen Waddle. You know, they had Odell a few years ago, and Sterling Shepard's their number one. Obviously, clear hole at wide receiver. Jalen Waddle goes in and just closes that hole pretty much perfectly. So San Francisco at number 12, the reigning NFC champions, they had a abysmal year. Now, granted, the last, I believe, 4 games of their season in total were played in Arizona, so not the ideal situation. And they had to host Buffalo in Arizona as well, so just not good. So there are some holes on this team. Obviously, quarterback, you could look at that to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo, but as we've mentioned, the top 4 quarterbacks are already gone off the board. I don't see them reaching for Mac Jones with all of these guys here on the board. You don't need tight end because George Kittle is fantastic. I think that wide receiver is probably the biggest hole for this team right now. Brandon Ayuk has had to step up and be kind of like a number 1/number 2 target for replacing Deebo Samuel. And San Francisco is a team that is just riddled with the injury bug every year. And I think that if you were to be able to throw a Heisman favorite into the San Francisco starting lineup, uh, San Francisco would be able to contend with not right away, obviously, but be able with their offense, be able to hang with defenses like Seattle, be able to hang with defenses like the Rams. And I know there's a lot of people in San Fran calling for Jimmy Garoppolo to get out, but I think that if you just let him have 1 year with Devonta Smith, just see what happens because San Francisco might be able to turn things around. Like their defense sent them to a Super Bowl last year, so they're not in the worst spot they could possibly be in. But I think that you have to keep adding those weapons outside. They don't have enough, or they're hurt. So they have to rely on running the football, which is their strong suit. But you have Nick Mullins under center, guys that are just hurt on defense as well. I think Nick Bosa was out for most of this year. Just tough look for the 49ers. But you add in a guy like Devonta Smith, a guy who was a standout in the college football playoff semifinal and has just been a stud all season. I think this is the direction San Francisco is going to go.
All right. Yeah, Joe, I think Devontae Smith is a great fit for this 49ers offense. I hadn't thought about it that much. I think you think a Heisman contender, he's probably going to go higher than this, but in our mock, he falls to 12. And that fit in the Kyle Shanahan offense, I think, is going to be great. Devontae Smith, a knock on him is he isn't big enough. He might get out-muscled by some of these NFL cornerbacks, but you get him in Kyle Shanahan's system, he can scheme that guy open. And we've seen it. We definitely saw it in the college football playoff semifinal. You get the ball into Devontae Smith's hands in the open field, he's going to make some plays. And I think he'll be able to do that in the 49ers offense. And he could add a lot to that offense.
Absolutely. And, you hit it right on the head, really. I think that San Francisco just needs a guy that you can just get the ball to, and you know that a play is going to be made, a big time catch is going to be made. It's tough to say that a rookie in the NFL is going to be able to do that, but I mean, they have the ability to do so. And I think that Jimmy Garoppolo would love to have Devonta Smith out wide. And you never know, a move like this could really improve San Francisco's offense, and they could put up a large amount of points on some really tough defenses in the NFC West.
Absolutely. So I think moving to 13, the Chargers are in a bit of a weird spot. They just fired their head coach, but Justin Herbert, likely the offensive rookie of the year. They've got weapons on the outside. Their defense is solid. I think the glaring need right now for this team is offensive line. And there's a number of guys you could address at this point. I think we've only had one offensive lineman go so far. So there's a lot of good ones down the board at this point. Um, it's you could take any of them at this point, and I think it'd be a good fit for this Chargers offensive line. Give Justin Herbert some more time to throw to guys like Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. You're going to be in a good spot. I think my pick here for this Chargers team is Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern. Good player, opted out this year, but was good last year at Northwestern, and it just gives you a guy that you can protect Justin Herbert with. I think that's the most important thing at this point for the team. You've got all the pieces around him. It's just about protecting him at this point, giving him more time. Like I said, there's weapons on the outside. If he has time to let those guys get open, that offense is going to do even more.
So happy you picked Rashawn Slater. He's my number one offensive lineman outside of Penei Sewell.
There you go.
I like his versatility the inside as well. He can play guard. And when you're looking at offensive linemen, obviously you have the franchise guys like Penei Sewell. Like he will be a blindside protector for, I think we have him going to Miami. So he'll be a blindside protector for Tua. So like there's your first tier. But then you have the versatile guys. Look, if you can do many skills in life, you're going to be hired. You're going to be a valuable commodity in this world. And Rashawn Slater's ability to go inside and play guard puts him at number 13 to the Chargers, being I believe the second. Yeah, he's the second offensive lineman in this draft. So I like this move. I think that the Chargers with Justin Herbert are in a fantastic spot with quarterback. Anthony Lynn, their head coach, was the Bills' offensive coordinator, and I really loved Anthony Lynn when he was in Buffalo. Really sad when he took the job in LA. But some things aren't a great fit. And I think that the Chargers, they need to be able to find that guy that will work with Justin Herbert and find guys that will let Justin Herbert throw the football. And Rashawn Slater will easily be that guy. Let's stay with offensive line with the Minnesota Vikings. Yeah. Let's stay with offensive. Well, no. The defense is a big problem. We'll address offensive line later. Defensive line's really rough. They got Yannick Ngakoue from the Jaguars, and that was kind of just a flop. Like, he didn't really stand out. And Minnesota has been they gave up, I believe they gave up 30 plus to Detroit last week. And they have just been a carpet for Aaron Rodgers, and one of the reasons why he is in the MVP conversation. Obviously, Josh Allen's going to win it, but I guess we'll throw Aaron Rodgers in there too. And so with this pick, I'm going to go with Gregory Rousseau out of Miami. I think that Rousseau, on a lot of people's boards, he's the number one edge rusher. I'm going to be completely honest here. I didn't see Greg Rousseau on my right, so I didn't really see him, and I kind of forgot about him, honestly. But I know that a lot of people have Greg Rousseau as their number one edge rusher out of Miami. Dude's a stud. I mean, you can't really stop him when he's going on the outside. And I think that if the Vikings have the ability to draft Rousseau, a guy who was pretty much in the top 10 the entire year going into this draft, I think that Minnesota would be very happy to get that dominant edge rusher outside that can apply some pressure to Aaron Rodgers, try and get the 35-plus-year-old on his feet, get him moving outside the pocket. And also, you have two other teams in that NFC North that have quarterback issues themselves. Trubisky could be the guy for the Bears, but he's very inconsistent. Rousseau could be a guy that twice a year just knocks Trubisky down every time. And then the Lions, obviously, they don't really have protection to back up their quarterback. And with Minnesota's offense, Justin Jefferson, yeah, I know. They have a really solid offense, and Kirk Cousins, he's still slinging the rock, so can't really look at quarterback replacement here. I think Gregory Rousseau from Miami, Florida, is going to be the guy.
Yeah, I think Rousseau has the chance to definitely go higher in this draft. He's not as polished as some of these other guys like Kwity Paye and Aziz Ojulari. He opted out this year, but he's extremely talented. He's very athletically gifted, long, athletic. He can make a lot happen. Still has to develop a bit technically, but I think a lot of guys forget Daniil Hunter on this Vikings defensive line. One of the best edge rushers in the league when he's healthy. Obviously missed this season. I think it was with a neck injury.
I think so
but
too,
he missed the year. He's very talented, and I think pairing up Rousseau and Hunter is going to create the purple people eaters all over again. I think this defensive line would be great with Rousseau. And yeah, like you said, they'd threaten a lot of quarterbacks, especially Aaron Rodgers with a line like this.
Well, I'm really happy that two teams above New England needed wide receiver because I don't need another stud wide receiver coming to this division. So, um, Braden, I think it's too early for quarterback. I don't think you find that Cam Newton replacement. Well, technically, your Tom Brady replacement just yet. So, where do you see the Pats going?
Yeah, so I know you just mentioned wide receiver. None of those guys fell to the Patriots, but I think you have the next best thing. I think in your case, the next worst thing, and that's Kyle Pitts.
Yup.
They've been missing that presence on the offense since Gronk retired and then came back, whatever you want to call it. But their quarterbacks haven't really had that guy to throw to, and Kyle Pitts is that guy. He's huge. He's fast. He's uncoverable. You put a linebacker on him, he's going to outrun him. You put a cornerback on him, he's going to outmuscle them. He's a huge threat. Part of the reason why Kyle Trask and that Florida offense has had so much success this year is because of Kyle Pitts. You put him into that New England system, give Bill Belichick a look at this guy, and who knows what that offense could look like next year. Obviously, quarterback needs to be addressed. Doesn't sound like Cam Newton's back, but whoever you throw out there, you give them a guy like Kyle Pitts, and they're going to have a better time for sure.
Yeah, and I think that David Asai, I think, is their top tight end,
Yeah.
and for all that's worth, he's pretty much their number one target outside of Julian Edelman. When Edelman's out, they're looking at that tight end, and it's tough for a Patriot offense that's built the system of being pass protectors and throwing down the field. All of a sudden, you have to change it for a guy like Cam Newton, who hasn't thrown the football as well as he did since 2015, and in a division with some stud defenses like Miami and Buffalo, and the Jets are starting to get there too. I think the Jets defense at a base level right now is pretty good. They just need to keep building off of it. I think that New England just needs to find that correct quarterback connection with Josh McDaniels. And unfortunately, the Pats will continue to be back at the top of that division with those two coaches at the helm. So number 16 is the Arizona Cardinals. I'm really shocked that they didn't make the playoffs this year. They had a really good year, first year with Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. I really like what they're building down there in Arizona, and I especially love their draft pick last year. They got Isaiah Simmons, who's like a linebacker, edge rusher, safety. He could probably play wide receiver if you really need him to, but just pretty much put him everywhere out on the field. And I think that with the great picks that Arizona's made, I think they're just going to continue making those safe picks, not going completely off the board. Obviously, 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, they got Kyler Murray at number one. So why not get some protection for him? And I think that the best offensive lineman right now is Sam Cosmi out of Texas. I really like his strength. I think that especially in a division like the NFC West, you're going to need guys that silence those big time pass rushers like Nick Bosa and Aaron Donald. And I think that you can pretty much take any of these offensive linemen and you'll be set. So with that being said, I'm just going to go with Sam Cosmi out of Texas. I really like how he was protecting Sam Ehlinger this past year. And I think that the Cardinals would make a home run selection here, drafting protection for Kyler.
Yeah, you said it earlier. You can never go wrong drafting an offensive lineman. You can never have too many of them. It's a position that gets hurt a lot, and they're integral to your offense. You need to protect a guy like Kyler Murray. He can get outside the pocket and run, but he's also a great thrower of the football. Cosmi will give him more time, and that offense will look a lot better with a solid offensive tackle protecting their quarterback. So I think leading into the Raiders pick, this is the one that I've had one guy here for a long time, and he's still here, and I'm glad that he's still here, and that's Kwity Paye. I think he's a really, really good edge rusher. You can make a case he's the best one in this draft. I'd say he's the most polished. He's done a lot for Michigan this year, and I think you get a guy who's as quick, who's athletic as Kwity Paye into the hands of John Gruden. A lot of things are going to happen. I think it was 2 years ago they took, I believe, Cleveland Farrell at fourth overall. That didn't work out. I thought it was a reach at the time, and it turned out to be. But I think you get Kwity Paye on this defensive line. You're going to wreak havoc in the AFC West, and you need to. Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, wherever the Denver Broncos end up going, you need guys who can rush the passer. Kwity Paye can do that and more. I think it's an ideal fit. Kwity Paye to the Raiders is going to be good.
Agree 100%. And, the Raiders are known for going off the board. As you mentioned, Cleveland Farrell went fourth overall. but a kind of a home run that they had was Henry Ruggs last year. We didn't really think Ruggs was the number one receiver in that draft class. The Raiders ended up taking the first receiver, which was Ruggs, and he worked out. And obviously, quarterback is a big issue, but again, I think that the quarterback position right now at this time at the draft isn't going to be a hot commodity. And when you have a guy like Kwity Paye, who, as I mentioned earlier, is a number one, number two on most people's draft boards, I think that the Raiders would love to add to that defensive line. So our final pick for this mock draft is the last non-playoff team that has a draft pick, and it's the Miami Dolphins. So Miami got Houston's pick. That's why they were able to pick third overall. And now 18 is their own selection. Now, with Miami, they're a fringe playoff team. Obviously, they've made some huge strides, 10-6, and they're not a playoff team. You really hate to see it because Miami's certainly building something down there. And there's a lot of different options they can go. Obviously, they already drafted Penei Sewell, so let's not go with offensive line. Rashad Bateman is a name that I'm really looking at as well. I think he has a chance to be a so-called lottery pick in this NFL draft, if you will. But I think they're going to continue to add on to that defense. Christian Wilkins, their draft pick from 2 years ago, he's a stud. He was just pretty much throwing around the Bills' offensive line last week, and he's been doing that all year. He's a really solid player. And I think that the linebacker position is a really interesting one. And when you have a guy who is the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, fist pumps, baby. That's a good pick. I think that Jeremiah Owusu-Koroma, my apologies if I got his name, if I pronounced his name incorrectly, but I think that he would be a menace for the Miami Dolphins. And I can easily see him being a guy that head coach Brian Flores, who's a defensive-minded head coach, really likes. And, sure, it sucks not making the playoffs, but here's your linebacker of the future right here. And I know that the quarterbacks in the AFC East would be thinking twice when you have to see Kyle Van Noy and Owusu-Koroma on that defensive side.
Yeah, I love this pick. I was shaking my fists in the air. This is my pick as well. And I'm glad you made it. I think I think it's Koromoa, if I'm not mistaken, but that's a tough one. Now we know. But yeah, Jeremiah Owusu-Koroma, great linebacker. He was a bright spot on this Notre Dame defense when they got smacked around by Alabama in the college football semifinal. He's a really good player. He's smart. He's always in the right gap. He doesn't make a lot of bad plays, and he can be all over the field. And you put a guy like that on the Dolphins defense, which was a really good spot on their team this year. Part of the reason why they had so much success, more success than people thought they would. You add to that defense, they're going to keep getting better and better. So I love Owusu-Koroma here. I think he's a great pick for the Dolphins.
Yeah, and so that does it for our first edition of the NFL mock draft. Obviously, guys that weren't drafted: Wyatt Davis, Christian Darrisaw, J.C. Horn. I think he is a solid. I think he's the best man-to-man cornerback in college football. Zaven Collins at linebacker, Joseph Osai, as I mentioned, Rashad Bateman. So there are going to be some studs that some of these playoff teams are able to pick up. And this is a really strong draft class at pretty much every position. So it'll be interesting to see how the mock draft will change over the next few months, especially with these non-playoff teams. But with the playoff teams especially, you might have, I don't want to see this, but let's just say Buffalo's picking at 20. Let's say they lose in the first round. Now they have the ability to draft a really solid player and continue their not really a rebuild anymore. They're kind of out of it, but continue their retool. And I think that any of these selections, if you're able to go to a fan of any of these teams, I think they'd be pretty happy with those selections. I don't think I'd make any changes to this really. I think that we're drafting based off of what teams need and the best players available, but also what possibly some general managers would do. And I think that's represented in both the Philly pick and the Dallas pick. And I'm pretty happy with this. What would you say?
Yeah, I'm happy with this too. I think Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith outside of the top 10 might be considered falling a little bit, but wide receiver isn't really a position that's drafted super high. You look at the draft last year, Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, even Henry Ruggs was the first receiver off the board at I think 11 or 12. And those are the most exciting players in college football. Everyone knows their names, so they think they're going to go high. And they absolutely could, but teams just don't really value wide receiver as much as some other positions like tackle, like defensive end, obviously quarterback, but corner as well. So those guys could definitely slide down the board right into the range of the Giants, 49ers, Chargers, or Minnesota, excuse me. So they could fall down the board a bit. That's a real possibility, but I'm happy with this draft. I'm happy with how it turned out. All in all, good first mock.
Absolutely. If you want to make your own mock draft, head on over to Pro Football Network. I think that they have the best one because you can also make trades in this. So who knows? Maybe in our last mock draft edition, we'll make a team go up and grab a quarterback. But I think that this is a really solid first episode. A nice first mock draft edition. And hopefully later this week, we will get a playoff prediction out because they are starting on Saturday at 1. So we'll try and get a playoff prediction show out as quickly as possible. I do have to get my wisdom teeth out this week, so that does suck for my Bills watching. So I'll keep you updated on Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter at Pooch and Reed Pod. Excuse me, that's Pooch and Reed Pod, Pooch. You can follow us on our personal Twitters as well at The Real Joe Pooch and at Braden Reed 6. And our Instagram is also Pooch and Reed Pod. Again, thank you for watching our first episode of the Pooch and Reed Podcast. For Braden Reed, I'm Joe Puccio signing off. Thank you for watching.